it's because these beliefs are seeping into the way our children think. So it's like we've kind of been content to direct what our children think, but not how they think. And so the way that they think, it can actually lead them to really bad conclusions.
Welcome to Truth.Love.Parents, where we use God's Word to become intentional, premeditated parents. Here's your host, AMBrewster.
What do you do when your kids ask, why does God hate gay people? Or, what's truth? Or exclaim, as Aaron Rodgers recently did, that, quote, I don't know how you can believe in a God who wants to condemn most of the planet to a fiery hell. What type of loving, sensitive, omnipresent, omnipotent being wants to condemn his beautiful creation to a fiery hell at the end of all of this? What do you say? If you had a good answer, then whether you know it or not, you're using something called apologetics. If you wish you had an answer, you're going to need apologetics. I've been following the Mama Bear Apologetics podcast for 3 years, and I cannot say enough about this ministry and the ladies who run it. I'm really sorry it's actually taking me so long to finally have them on the show, but God's timing is perfect, and I'm very excited about the content of our episode today. In June of this past year, the Mama Bears published their first book entitled Mama Bear Apologetics, Empowering Your Kids to Challenge Cultural Lies. I snatched it up last summer and loved everything about it, and today I get to tell you why. Now, what's really cool is that I have someone here to help me explain it to you. The general editor and the original Mama Bear herself, Hillary Ferrer, will be joining me to discuss the book, but also dig into the fourth chapter of the book in greater detail. Why the fourth chapter? Well, you'll have to wait to find out. Hillary is the founder and Mama Bear in Chief. She feels a huge burden for providing accessible apologetics resources for busy moms. And honestly, I think dads can be equipped and are equipped just as well by her resources. I know that I definitely have by reading her book and by listening to her podcast. She has her master's degree in biology from Clemson University. Her specialities are in scientific apologetics, critiques of the Darwinian mechanism, dealing with doubt, and identifying causes and solutions for youth leaving the church. She and her husband have been married for 12 years and minister together as an apologetics team in the local church. Lastly, this is very interesting, extremely important, her bio on the Mama Bear website provides this very helpful information. It says she can never sneak up on anybody because of her chronic hiccups, which you can hear occasionally on the podcast. So please help me welcome apologist and hiccup aficionado, Hillary Ferrer.
Thank you. That's probably the most original introduction I've gotten.
Yay! I like originality.
Yes.
And Hillary, please know that this is a very safe place, all right? I am an understanding husband of a wife with chronic hiccups myself.
Oh, you are?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but man, oh man, it is a cross YouTube bear. I know that to be true.
Sometimes I don't even hear it anymore. It's just so, I just kind of see the reaction on people's face and I'm like, oh, I must have hiccuped or something. Like I'll listen to it when I listen back. I'm like, oh, I don't remember that. But yeah, so...
Well, we'll
luckily,
make sure
John thinks it's cute, and that's,
that's all that matters. We'll make sure to leave all of the hiccups in because they're providential, and it's kind of like Selah, in the Psalms. Okay, it points to something we're not sure what, but we'll keep them
that's
there.
The spirit just bubbling forth.
All right, now, man, we're already falling apart here. This is gonna be an amazing interview. Now, okay, I know I just talked about it, but I would love to hear from you personally about Mama Bear Apologetics and specifically how God led you to start the ministry.
Well, it was kind of funny. He led me to start the ministry because, well, I have to say it was absolutely him leading because there's no way me as a non-mom would have ever thought, oh, not only was I a non-mom, I've never participated in women's ministry. And so this was not something that had been like this childhood dream of mine to start a women's ministry. I always said that I would never live in the Midwest. I'd never be a teacher. I'd never get an advanced degree. I would never write a book. And I would never start a ministry. I'm sure there's a couple other ones there, but basically my life has been a series of I'll nevers, as I sit here in the Midwest as an ex-teacher, talking about my women's ministry and the book that we just wrote.
Yeah, don't say I'll never. I think God has this great sense of humor, and you're just inviting it when you say it.
So I've started. I'm like, I'll never be a millionaire. That's my
there you go.
now.
Yeah.
It was several years ago when I had found out from the person who had originally started. At the time, it was International Society of Women in Apologetics, and she had said that there was a large demographic of women out there who would not read something unless it was written by women for women. And that came as a real shock to me, just because I'd kind of always been in a man's world. I was sort of a daddy's girl. And so I was real comfortable being in a man's world in essence. And so when I found out that there was a large, like, why aren't women more interested in this? And I discovered this demographic that just really didn't like to read stuff unless it was written by women for women. I thought, well, goodness, who's reaching the women here? And more importantly than that, who's reaching the moms? Because I think the moms are just such a key demographic to training kids up in the faith. And they're doing so much already. It's like, we could make 1,000 youth apologists, or we could reach 1,000 moms. And it seemed more efficient to kind of go for the moms themselves.
Yeah.
So basically, I had a series of nights where I couldn't sleep, and I've since learned that this is how sometimes maybe if the Lord's tried to say something before and I'm not listening, that he's like, fine, you can't sleep until you get it all written down. So it was knocking through my head, this phrase, Mama Bear Apologetics, Mama Bear Apologetics. And so finally I got up and I was like, fine, I'll just write this down. But then I started writing down more things. And before you know it, like through about 3 or 4 nights, I just had an almost entire notebook full of what I wanted to see this ministry become. And so after the end of that, I was like, well, that just happened. And so I just tried to find a friend who wanted to start it with me. And so grabbed a friend, and we went out and learned about microphones and started learning how to podcast. And it took us about a year before when we actually started and when we actually advertised the ministry. Because actually I think it was more than a year. It was like a year and a half, because we didn't want to like point people towards a website that didn't have anything on it. So we kind of wanted to have at least some of our ducks in a row, some content up there. And then we started publishing, and it was really well received. Within a few years, I had a publisher asking about, we'd like a book from you. And so it's just kind of snowballed from there.
That's really awesome. And how many years has it been since you started podcasting?
So I'm trying to remember. It was either 2015. It was like spring of 2015. And I don't think we went live till August of 2016. So I got all confused when we made t-shirts. What, how they have like that established date. Yeah. I'm like, do we put 2015 or 2016? So I just put 2015 because that's when we started, if not the ministry publicly. So, well,
that's really
funny,
because
I thought 5 years.
Yeah, I thought you guys had started. Well, and you did start before we did. But yeah, our first episode went out. I was not as wise as you. I basically recorded and posted, and then read an article that said you're supposed to like let out 3 of your first episodes at one time and all this other kind of stuff. And I didn't do any of that. So we started in September of 2016. Okay. So it's our podcasts are kind of the same age. It's cool. Well, yours is more mature though, but that's
It's all good. Yeah. So yeah, that was the month after we went public with stuff.
Awesome.
Would be September.
Now, before we talk about the book in any more detail, I do want to tell you, listeners, that Hillary and her team are really awesome, and for lots of reasons, but specifically, they have given TLP 2 copies of the book that we're going to talk about today, Mama Bear Apologetics, Empowering Your Kids to Challenge Cultural Lies. We're going to give away those 2 books next week, and we'll tell you later in the show what you have to do for a chance to win your copy, so stay tuned to that. Now, Hillary, first, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Julie, the other Hillary, TC, Rebecca, Catherine, and Lisa for investing so much time into this book.
Thank you.
I personally just loved reading it because it was not only overflowing with solid biblical content, but really, and I use this word honestly, okay? It was about as scholarly as a book like this should be. Not how scholarly as it could be, but as it should be. I read and I listen. I read and I listen quite widely when it comes to content for women. I think I'm probably a guy who listens to more mom podcasts than moms do. I love what they do. I love the passion and the motivation behind most of what they're doing. But often I find that it kind of lacks writing chops. I'm not trying to be mean. There are a lot of guys out there who are doing a terrible job too. But they lack writing chops, they lack clear research, they lack enjoyable tone, and really the erudite handling of the topic that appears in the Mama Bear book. Okay, it's all there. For those of you who are listening, I think if you've ever read any of Natasha Crane's stuff, and Natasha is like an honorary Mama Bear herself, if you like the tone and the voice of her book, you're going to love this book. So thank you, first of all, for that. Second, though, I'd love to hear really what motivated you to co-author this book. So you started the ministry, you had a publishing house say, hey, we want you to do a book. And I'm really, if we're being honest, I'm sure it's a culmination of a lifetime of God's working in you, the things that you've learned and how he's equipped you. But kind of give us the highlights of how this particular book came to be.
Well, ironically, I didn't have a vision for this book like at all at first. I had a different book that I really wanted to write, and that was what I actually presented to the publisher at the time. And they said, we think that would make a great second book. And as soon as they said that, I thought they're going to ask me to do a Mama Bear book first. And I was right. They wanted a Mama Bear book. So I just kind of started thinking about what books were already out there and what I felt was lacking, because I didn't want to go and just write somebody else's book and just have a second identical book out there. And Natasha had just gotten done with, I think the first two of her books.
Mm-hmm.
The second one might've been really close. I did an endorsement for the second one, so I got to read that one early. So I kind of knew, and I knew where her other ones were going. So I knew I didn't want to duplicate that. So I actually had a conversation with Natasha first to find out, let me make sure I'm clear on what you're doing so I'm not duplicating your efforts. And really what we landed on, or kind of what I landed on, I had several different ideas, but it was this idea of we're looking at the questions. So Natasha's really good with dealing with the questions. And my question was, where are those questions coming from? Because those questions aren't coming from a vacuum. They're coming from somewhere. And so when you start digging back a little bit deeper, you discover these worldview and the isms is kind of what we call it, that have undermined kids' abilities to have faith. And that's where the questions are coming from. Mm-hmm. So I kind of tried to put together some ideas. And then I thought, I want this to be a team effort. Everything with Mama Bear, I want to be a team effort. And so I gathered together basically some of the ladies who had just been really excited about Mama Bear and maybe had written some articles or wanted to be involved at the beginning, and said, okay, we have someone asking us for a book, so here's some ideas. And they looked at some of my different ideas, and I think we all kind of gravitated towards the idea that became the final copy of this book. And there was one chapter actually, well, there were several chapters that we had to cull down to see, does this one fit into this book? And there was one chapter mid-writing that we actually had to scrap to include a different chapter because in doing all the research for the feminism, it became so obvious that basically we needed to address Marxism.
So what got booted?
The chapter on individualism. And so I think we were able to kind of mix that in with a lot of the other chapters, this idea of, it's kind of the American, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps kind of, it's all about me and my mission and just this kind of rugged individualism that has some good to it. But at the end of the day, we've lost a lot of what we see, say, in the Old Testament with communal responsibility and communal learning and communal memory and all these other things. So, but yeah, the Marxism, it was like this thread that started going through so many other different things that were like, holy cow, we need to address that. So that's really how it came about. And as I started writing this book with them, these topics just took on more and more of an importance that it was so weird how I didn't even have a vision for it at first. And they just became so important to where I was saying, oh my gosh, this is everywhere. And then actually the linguistic theft it's going to be its own chapter, and it just didn't quite fit. We called it redefinitionalism, and and we thought it would be funny to make up a word for something about people making up words. But when I realized, that's not really a lie per se, it's a tactic. Mm-hmm. And so when I realized it was a tactic, I said, that needs to be in the intro chapters. And then we got down to where there was only, what was it? It was like 11. And that was like this really awkward number. It's like, really, you couldn't have just made it 10 or expand it to 12. So then we had to find another chapter there, which, we ended up replacing with Marxism. But yeah, so I think we really started opening our eyes up to the culture and looking at what was going on in culture, and really pooled our collective observations and knowledge together to come out with the concepts in this book of what we see were the lies that basically kids were eaten up like crazy. I think it started out, the subtitle was 12 Cultural Lies and How to Keep Your Kids from Swallowing Them. But we just couldn't get good artwork for it, so we ended up changing the subtitle. And I'm glad we did, because I hated every subtitle idea they gave me until this one. Then I was like, okay, I don't hate it. And now I love the subtitle, so.
Oh yeah, and this
So,
totally
yeah.
sounds like you. This sounds like exactly like something I'd hear on your podcast, empowering your kids to challenge cultural lies. That's just
Yeah.
it's perfect. And well, you've already mentioned a little bit about it. I really appreciate how the book is organized. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, and I know the book has been out for a little while. I feel super bad that I'm getting to this so late, but if you haven't read it, you need to read it. I don't care when you're hearing about this. If this is 300 years in the future, read this book. There are two main parts to the book. Okay, so the first lays the foundation for being a mama or a papa bear. And then the second part deals with this panoply of, as Hillary said, isms. Okay, and these isms are plaguing our society. And the worldviews that are desperately trying to, like you said, persuade our kids, eat our kids alive, really, at every turn. And you've mentioned a couple of them, but you deal with feminism, naturalism, postmodernism, moral relativism, Marxism, okay, and a bunch more. And I can see that, I can just imagine in my head when I say that, a lot of today's listeners may struggle just a little bit with these topics because they sound like collegiate classes, okay?
Well, that's why we gave them a punchy little title to make you laugh first, and then they wanted to maybe take the whole thing out, but I was like, no, we can't. We originally had it to where the ism was first and then the subtitle, but we finally agreed to switch it, so like, the truth is there is no truth. That's the postmodernism chapter. My brain is trustworthy according to my brain, our naturalism chapter.
Yep.
So we try to give things that would make people laugh, because it can be kind of, what's the word? Not heady, but like, the topics can feel overwhelming if you're just looking at a big word. So we're like, I got to make them laugh, because then they'll see that there's nothing to be feared here. You just need to learn how to, get that little bad critter lie out of your vocabulary.
Exactly. And I think you make it accessible. I think there are funny tones. I think the stories and the allusions and the metaphor you use are fantastic. And I want to address this because I think it's really easy, especially in the church. I guess it's hard to say that, because you say the church nowadays, and what does it even mean, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but
yeah,
I think the problem is, at least in the circles in which I've grown up, you're talking about God's word, and you've got Bible quiz teams, and everyone knows the scriptures, right? And that's fantastic. It's absolutely necessary. And if it's of the world, it's just patently rejected, which oftentimes is not a bad move. But sometimes we're so completely ignorant of it that, Marxism, probably most people listening know, okay, well, that has to do with Karl Marx, but what did he really believe? So people might have a hard time understanding how these isms could be super practical for that average God-loving dads and moms who are basically just trying to help their high schoolers graduate from high school with, without tanking their grades, and their elementary schoolers, to eat their vegetables. Okay. So can you just kind of give us an overview about why these potentially heady, maybe potentially a little scary looking isms are really very practical, very important topics for Christian parents to understand?
Yeah, it's because these beliefs are seeping into the way our children think. So it's like we've kind of been content to direct what our children think, but not how they think.
Yes.
So the way that they think, it can actually lead them to really bad conclusions. And I don't think it's enough to just teach them what to believe. They need to know, how did I come to this conclusion? I mean, that's that classic, question by Greg Koukl, where he teaches people to have conversations with people who maybe have an unbiblical worldview. How do you start dismantling that unbiblical worldview? You ask them, oh, that's interesting. How did you come to that conclusion? And if we're going to be honest, our kids need to be able to say the exact same thing. They need to say, how did I come to the conclusion that Christianity is true? How did I come to the conclusion that absolute truth exists? So I think that everything basically rests on the foundation of believing that truth exists. Basically, that there are some things that are true for everyone at all times in all places, because my friend Elizabeth Urbanowitz, who has something called the Foundations Worldview Curriculum, she knows the exact week that parents and youth pastors and principals will start calling her, which is the week on truth, when they discover that none of their kids believe that some things are absolutely true for everybody.
Wow.
And to not be able to even believe that something's true for everybody, that is the foundation of the Christian message, of saying that God is absolute. Who he says he is in his word is absolute. But if you don't believe that absolute exists, that's a problem. And that's easy pickings for the enemy, that once that lie has taken root, that nothing's absolutely true, they may be, rah, rah, rah at youth group and think, yeah, you're great, Mom, for being a Christian, but maybe that's not my truth once they get older. Mom's been teaching me her truth, not the truth. And the mom's not even aware that this shift has happened until the kid says, I don't believe in God anymore. And she's saying, what? You've never said anything before. And they just pat her on the head and say, no, I'm fine with your truth. That's your truth, not mine. And at that point, they're speechless. They don't know what to do.
Yeah. And oftentimes, I mean, your kids aren't going to know maybe necessarily what naturalism is. They might, if they're going to a public school, they might not know what Marxism is. But here's the thing, all of these isms are filtering into all of the entertainment that they're consuming, their music, their shows, their movies, the books that they're reading. It's absolutely everywhere. It's coming through the vocabulary of their schoolmates and of their teachers. So understanding these isms is desperately important, because it is influencing everyone and how we think and how we respond to what other people are thinking. So yeah, this is super, super practical.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'd say that, like, the naturalism, the kids are really believing that unless you can repeat it in a science lab, then you can't really know it for sure.
At that point, it's goodbye, God.
I mean, like, that discounts basically everything from the Bible. Or one of the things that Julie noticed, she was the one who did a lot of the prayers for the book, is that I think it was her, me, and Rebecca noticed that a theme throughout all of these was idolatry. It's this idea of something that we're replacing for worship with God. So like TC's chapter on self-helpism, we have replaced the gospel, the gospel of Jesus's life, death, resurrection, and salvation from sins. We've replaced that salvation as being, I need to have self-affirmations, and that's how I'm going to feel better about myself. Or as in Marxism, like, what is original sin? If you get original sin wrong, you're going to get the solution wrong every time. And original sin within Marxism is capitalism. And it's being presented as a whole complete worldview and as a salvation from your sin of capitalism, or in feminism's point, the patriarchy. That's original sin. And we see that in our culture everywhere. It's toxic masculinity. Our world would not be where it is if we just didn't have toxic masculinity. All of these things are what they're saying. I can identify one major problem. It's the biggest problem, and it's this, and this is how you get saved from it. And that is what our kids are being fed.
Yeah, and I actually let's talk just a little bit about one of the ones you mentioned, the whole Marxism thing. This is huge because we're coming up on an election, and people's political ideologies are coming out, and we have lots of words being thrown around. You've got socialism, and some people are being called communists, other people are being called Nazis, and we got we just, all of this stuff being thrown around. But
that's actually the one thing I discovered that everybody agrees on. It's like being a Nazi's bad. That's exactly. That's the only thing that our whole world can agree on. So I thought that was kind of funny.
But but Marxist ideologies are out there, and they are present in our political debates today. Okay, whether you know that they're Marxist or not. And one of the things I thought was interesting when I was studying this, and I love your chapter on it. I love anything that reminds me of college and my university experience, because I just really enjoyed that. But and I taught economics on high school level for a while too. But from a Marxist standpoint, the whole foundation is built on the fact that they deny the reality of sin. Human beings are getting better. We're evolving. It's the naturalism and all that kind of stuff is all part of it. But we're getting better. Whereas it's interesting that capitalism comes at it from the standpoint, it says that capitalism is going to work because we sin. Because you only care about you and I only care about me, capitalism is going to make sense. Whereas on the other side, Marxism, socialism, communism, all that kind of stuff are coming in and saying, no, we're getting better, and we're going to come to this place where we all care more for each other than we do for ourselves. And it's that one fundamental disagreement that if we buy into that, we're completely denying what the scripture says about man and their sin.
Yeah, is man basically good? And Marxism would say yes, and Christianity says no, we are not basically good. And I think, like you said, capitalism is based on the fundamental principle that man is not basically good, and therefore we need to have some way to kind of rein him in. And even though we don't get super political with that chapter, I think that's a really excellent point that does need to be made. And this would be one of those foundational isms. In this case, it would be humanism, that it's starting off. that's where that whole foundation, worldview foundation is starting off. Instead of man is basically sinful, it's man is basically good. That's a pretty big problem to ignore.
No, massive. Now, I really appreciate the time that we've taken here looking at this book. If you're listening right now, I originally, and this happens to me, it happens to me on nearly every interview I do. There's just so much great content. We get talking and talking and talking, and next thing we know, all our time is gone. But there's so much more to say. Now, what I want to do is this: I want to wrap up our discussion about the book and bring an end to this show. But I'm going to bring Hillary back next time because we're going to dig into chapter 4 of the Mama Bear Apologetics book, and we're really going to look at it because, as I promised you a few weeks ago, I want to talk about our family's vocabulary. I want to talk about how we communicate with each other, because I think that if we're not careful, we as Christians are going to lose the battle that is being waged in this war for our children, and it's going to hinge a lot on vocabulary. That may sound crazy to you that I would say it that way, but I hope you join us next time, because I want Hillary and I to really dig into chapter 4 and to figure out what this thing is that she calls linguistic theft. Now, before we sign off for today, though, I'm curious, Hillary, what's the best place that our listeners can connect with you guys?
There's a couple different places. We have an email connect on our website at mamabearapologetics.com. On Facebook, we have a page, and just Twitter and Instagram. Now, I do have to say that we have started getting a lot more emails since the book has come out. And so I do my best to answer those as well as I can, but I can't always get to every single one of them. But yeah, so those are the 4 main ways, I guess, would be email, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Yeah. Actually, don't message me on Instagram. Yeah, I probably won't see it there. All the other ones, though, are good.
Well, we will include all of those links, as well as the link to Mama Bear Apologetics homepage in the notes today in the description, so you guys can find that. Thank you so much, Hillary, for talking about the book, helping us. Really, thank you for dedicating the time to do what you do, to equip us parents to really help our children be able to argue for the truths of God.
My pleasure.
Now, for those of you who have stuck with us through the end of the episode, I want to tell you how you can earn a chance to win a copy of Mama Bear Apologetics, Empowering Your Kids to Challenge Cultural Lies. Lord willing, on Thursday, April 2nd, 2020, Team TLP and I will conduct a drawing. I will then announce on Friday's show the names of our winners. Now, this is very similar to the drawing that we have going on with Natasha Crane's book, and you can learn all about this at Truth.Love.Parent.com underneath our resources tab on the book giveaway page. But between now and then, you have 3 ways to get your name into the drawing. I'll explain them here, and of course, I'll include detailed instructions on today's episode notes at our blog, takingbackthefamily.com, as well. Now, you may be saying, Aaron, it came out in June. I already own the book. That's fantastic. I invite you to participate as long as you promise to give away the book to another parent. This can be an awesome opportunity for you to invest in your parenting community. Team TLP and I have devised 3 ways to get your name into the drawing. You don't have to do all 3, but you do have to do at least one. Of course, the more you do, the better your chances of winning. The first opportunity to get your name in the drawing is this. Go to TLP's Facebook page and find the post entitled TLP 350, Mama and Papa Bear Apologetics, Hillary Ferrer interview, with the hashtag contest. It's very important that you find the post with the hashtag contest. There are 4 easy things you have to do after that. Like the TLP Facebook page, and of course, many of you have done that, so that step's done. Like or love the post. Comment on the post by telling us what you loved about Hillary and this episode. Finally, share the post publicly with the hashtag linguistic theft. That's one way you can get your name into the drawing one time. Now, to double your chances of being picked, head over to Instagram. We will have an image featuring the cover art for this episode and the hashtag contest. All you have to do is make sure you're following TLP on Instagram, click the heart under the image, comment on the image telling us what one word you wish we could steal back from the culture, and then click on what looks like a paper airplane icon and share the image to your story. But make sure you use the hashtag linguistic theft. After that, your name will be submitted a second time into the drawing. Now, why are we using the hashtag linguistic theft? That's not what we talked about today. You're right, but it's going to be all about what we talk about the next time. We're going to start off a 3-part communication study, and it's going to jump off with Hillary, again, meeting with us next time to talk about chapter 4 of her book, Linguistic Theft. And that's going to be the hashtag that you want to use for this contest all throughout the week. All right, once you've done all of that, there's a third way to get your name into the drawing. If you have a Twitter account, make sure you're a follower of @Truth.Love.Parent. I think you're definitely seeing the trend here. Find the image with the contest hashtag and click the heart. Then select retweet with comment. For your comment, tell Twitter how TLP is helping you to be a biblical parent. And that's it. Again, you only have to do one of those to be entered. However, if you do all three, your name will be entered 3 times. Anyone can participate as long as they have followed TLP on their chosen social media platform. Like the post, comment on the post, share the post, and use the hashtag linguistic theft. Using that hashtag is very important because that's how we're going to be able to find your submissions and enter you into the contest, so make sure your spelling is accurate. You have all week to share the contest episode. We'll tally up the submissions on that Thursday, and then we'll announce the winners on Friday's episode. Please share this episode on your favorite social media outlets while you are there. I know that everyone wants to read this book. Trust me, you just do. And join us next time as we get back together with Hillary Ferrer and talk about Chapter 4 of her book, Linguistic Theft.
Truth.Love.Parent is part of the Evermind Ministries family and is dedicated to helping you become an intentional, premeditated parent. Join us next time as we search God's Word for the truth your family needs today.